I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day, there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not put them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today's topic is hyper-independence in Asian girls.
A topic that I'd like to say Rihanna and I know just a little too well. And I'm sure some of you also know very well. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know it well or at all, hyper-independence is known as when you choose to be independent of everyone, even though it may negatively affect you. So, for instance, like refusing to ask for help ever, or just in a sense isolating yourself from people because, well, the reasons vary, but some of the reasons could be because you feel like you have to do it yourself, or you must do it yourself. I mean, that kind of means the same thing, but you have to do it yourself because of blah blah, or certain like environmental aspects have led you to like reject people and help.
You might just believe that there is like no other option than to be independent. But yeah, as Tiffany was saying, there's somewhat of like a link. So we actually touched upon this in a past episode. There is something called the AAPI, which no, it doesn't stand for Asian, or what is it? Oh my god, I can't.
Asian American Pacific
Islander.
Islander.
I always forget that there's American in there.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, why is there American in there? But yes, Asian American Pacific
we
Islander.
We personally refer to it or see it as API.
Yeah.
But the reason why API is more popular is because Asian American, I think that kind of came first, or just is more popularized. And so sometimes you might even see like Asian Canadians, the people that aren't even American, use API.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk last year and also I think the year before about just using API.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to specify.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's partially a governmental thing, because I think
that makes sense.
API.
I mean, it has to be recognized by.
Yeah, and also API Heritage Month is what is known as in the US, officially, and so and you get everything.
Yeah, so don't come for me for not knowing what that stands for, because.
And now on with the show.
Yes, so we digress. The study is called AAPI, which stands for Adult Adolescent Parenting Inventory. And so this is an inventory. It's like a little like questionnaire type thing to find out the parenting style. And a study was done using the AAPI, and they found that Asian American mothers use 4 different categories in parenting, way more than European American mothers. So these categories include role reversal, which means that children are obligated to comfort and care for their parents instead of the parents doing that. Empathy or lack of empathy towards the child's feelings. Inappropriate developmental expectations, so expecting your child to be more grown up than they actually are. And corporal punishment, so example, the use of spanking. And the funny thing is, hyper-independence stems from all of these things. So all of these 4 categories of parenting. So again, like lack of empathy from their parents can lead to self-soothing strategies because again, they don't get that soothing from their parents, which leads to independence.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see this happen a lot in this episode, where Rihanna and I may make jokes while explaining or talking about these things. And just to put it out there, none of these things are jokes.
Yeah,
It's
no.
more so the
Coping.
typical kind of using humor as a coping mechanism thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
We, as people that have dealt with and seen and are seeing, dealing with hyper independence,
Yeah.
we like to think that we can do that.
Mhm.
Uh,
I'm sure
and we
that
we
if
hope that we
you,
don't make you uncomfortable.
yeah, if you are also relating to this, I'm sure that you find this hilarious if we make jokes and stuff like that. But I'm sure
Mhm.
if you're not used to it, it's probably a little jarring, which again,
Mhm.
understandable. But
Mhm.
just know this is coming from a coping
Yeah.
standpoint and not a we're making fun of anybody.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if anything, we're making fun of ourselves. So
Indeed.
yeah.
And one of the things I was gonna say is, which I think is a good way of explaining the whole inappropriate developmental expectations. I made a joke to Rihanna about this one time where you can just a picture a parent and then a child, like I don't know, a baby or just a very young child. And they're doing something that every child does, or
Mhm.
maybe they're just crying, right? And
Mhm.
then the parent is just looking at them and being like, "Why are you why are you doing that?
Yeah. Why
Why
are
are
you
you
doing insert normal reaction to
yeah.
something?
Why are you being like that?"
Yeah. Why are you crying after I just yelled at you?
Mhm.
Like, what?
Yeah, or
You
even
tell
just like,
me.
why are you crying in general? If
Yeah.
the obviously not all Asian parents, but some Asian parents, when their kids cry, they just kind of stare at them.
Yeah. It's a very typical one. Just-
And of course, we know that that's partially because their parents probably did that, but
Mhm.
that doesn't make it okay.
Mhm.
So acknowledge, but don't. I don't want to say. Well, I'm not defend, but like don't
Yeah.
justify.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I do want to bring up the role reversal category. I find that very interesting because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about it, like how parents, like especially mothers, expect their children to like soothe them, which
Mhm.
gets into this whole like universal topic of like mothers and what they go through and how like mothers shouldn't be expected. Like there's this whole
Mhm.
thing about like um moms who never like got their like have their own issue with their mom, so then they pass it down to their own kids. And so they're
Mhm.
seeking that from their own kids, and like the whole concept of a mother's love is the exact same thing as a mother's hatred, like
Mhm.
that whole thing. I find it very interesting because it is such a big player into hyper independence. Like when you are like a child and your mother is depending on you to soothe her, even as a joke, like you grow up thinking that you have that responsibility and like you need to be doing that for
Mhm.
people. So I
Yeah.
appreciate this inventory, whoever made this inventory, for adding that as a category. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I feel seen.
And in its own way, that can happen with fathers as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. You'll notice, especially if you are an Asian daughter or an Asian like eldest daughter, or that a lot of the time these responsibilities fall on said daughter
Hmm.
rather than the son,
Hmm.
because gender roles cultural expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just for Asian people. This is just a huge problem that we have.
Yeah,
where, sure. I mean, just universally, or for the most part, you can see a daughter, they're forced to take care of their sibling in replacement of the parents. And they have to take on this almost parental like role instead of growing up as they should be able to. Which of course sometimes that can be more of like an economic circumstance,
That's true.
which is different.
It's a whole nother like aspect to it.
But when it comes to parents just in a sense neglecting or not caring enough to take care of the kids, it's like, oh, can't you just do this? Like that's more of the thing I'm talking about right now. Because of course with economic circumstances, parents away at work all the time, the daughter does also have to do what I just described, but for a different set of reasons, and both would be assigned differently in that circumstance.
It's funny you bring that up because it's not necessarily a trend, but I've seen a handful of TikToks that were like oldest daughter or like firstborn girls talking about how their younger brothers would accidentally call them mom.
Oh yeah.
And it's just so like it's so sad to see like how many people are like, oh, same, and people just talking about how like, oh, I wish my brother didn't have to call me mom. I wish that there was a mom figure. And, like a lot of girls even saying like, I'm kind of jealous that at least he has an elder female figure in his life to fulfill that mom role, because these girls didn't have that, you know?
For sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of talk about that on social media. I've seen tweets or reposts of tweets of people with very strong opinions about this, talking about little girls losing their childhood and the unfairness and all of this, which I definitely feel. I mean, I'm an only child, and
Yes, same.
so are you, but I feel it in different ways, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about more personal experiences.
For sure. And again, like if you're sitting there thinking, well, it doesn't have to be just Asian girls or just girls in general. Well, like think about gender roles and like societal norms or expectations. Like
think about look at children's toys.
Yeah.
How often do you see a baby toy, like I mean the ones that you pretend to raise, marketed to little boys?
Yeah, never.
It's most of the time it's marketed towards little girls, and then you have these little girls being conditioned to care for, or have to like take on some, or just
feel the need to
some what's the word, subliminal messaging.
Yeah.
And it triggers or jump starts the whole quote unquote maternal instinct.
And like, yeah, it's
I'm
true.
sure every 2-year-old has.
Yeah, no, exactly.
2-year-old
like,
girl.
I'm sure there are maternal instincts in women, but not children. They are children. Like, why is this a thing? It's weird.
Many people have nurturing instincts, but I don't know. I've always found it weird that they make little girls have all of these sometimes very realistic caring for children toys. And I mean, even beyond that, the whole like cooking toys, all those things, they're just training them for the life of a stereotypical like housewife. Which there is, and if there isn't anything wrong with being a housewife, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before.
Yeah. It's just weird to push it onto children.
They barely understand the world they're in.
Yeah, let's just let them be children first, maybe. Thought about that.
Yeah, it's just creepy.
It is.
Before we started talking about toys and the general expectation for little girls or just daughters to have to co-parent their siblings, I almost said children, co-parent their siblings. You see what they're doing to us?
You almost became a TikTok right there.
You know, actually, one time when we were having a group conversation, we were saying earlier, we were talking about role reversal. One time when I was having a conversation with you and some friends at lunch, I called my parents my children. You remember that?
I think so, yeah.
I was talking about waiting for, they were looking for something, and I said I was waiting for them in a store, and I said I was waiting for my kids or something. And then one of our friends was like, "What? You're what?" You see what they're doing to us?
Yeah.
Anyways, like Rihanna was saying about TikTok just now, there's the multitude of memes and posts that very inside joke like posts that people make about the eldest daughter or Asian daughter experience, first gen Asian daughter experience at insert of just the list goes on.
Yeah, it really does. Very if you know style videos.
Yeah, and there's one that I've seen that is more so catered to girls in general, but I do kind of see it as a first gen girl, like Asian girl meme, and it was about let me just pull it up real quick. It was a meme about the movie Black Swan, and it said something along the lines. But let me just get it real quick. There's this tweet, and I'll put it up on the screen, where it says the feminine urge to be perfect and in control always, which is not that far away from hyper independence sometimes, or all the time. And if you don't necessarily understand or get the reference, the feminine urge in itself is a meme, which is something that I can't really tell you the history of it, but you could probably find it online.
People just say it. It's a
Yeah,
meme
it's just
format.
the urge to do this, and then they say like the feminine urge to do this, and of course it's not necessarily always inherently feminine, but they're just shared experiences.
Yeah.
And also, to be perfect and in control always was something that the protagonist in Black Swan struggled with. And so it just all works out.
Meme review. 10 out of 10. In terms of personal experiences, I kind of like mentioned it earlier, like teased you guys earlier by saying I feel seen. But for me, I feel like my hyper independence really stemmed from that whole like role reversal aspect of things. But also at the same time, I was a very, very like anxious kid who had a lot of separation anxiety from my parents, like in general.
For sure.
So like independence in as a whole was pushed upon me really early and like really heavily, at least how I felt, because it was understandable because I never wanted to be independent, but I had to be because I was like way too scared for my age of like everything, you know? So it's
Yeah.
understandable, but the way that it like developed into like who I am as a person now is probably not normal, I'd say. Um but again, I feel like it's understandable because of how I was as a child. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like again, I've talked about this a lot. I was a dancer, and probably by like age 10, I was already like doing everything myself, like bringing myself back or like not backstage, but like in the dressing room, doing my hair, doing everything like by myself. My parents didn't even have to be at the venue. I'd just be there by myself, soothe myself if I lost, like
Mm-hmm.
be there for myself if something happened, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, um it's hard to think of like general examples.
You don't have to do that.
But
The
yeah,
floor is yours.
role reversal. Boo. That's how I feel.
Yeah. So, I have a question about something that you were talking about in terms of how you had to take care of yourself and soothe yourself during dance classes, or not dance classes, recital and competition.
Mm-hmm.
So, seeing the parents of other kids do what you were essentially doing for yourself, how did that make you feel about those kids and their parents? And also, how did that make you feel about your parents? In terms of like what, because if everyone else in that room was doing what you were doing, you probably think that it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
But then because you see other people not doing that, you probably wonder things or assume things,
Mm-hmm.
start to believe things.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I it's funny because I think I saw extremes of things. So I saw like typical just like parents like doing the kids' hair and like congratulating them or whatever. But I also saw extremes of kids like having tantrums
Mm-hmm.
and their parents having to deal with that. I
Right.
remember being like, wow, like this kid is literally throwing a tantrum and they're not getting like what's the word? Like disciplined for it, like a public
Oh,
tantrum.
yeah, yeah.
And like it's fine and I'm here like by myself. But at the same time, I didn't I honestly like didn't really wish that my own parents were there at the same time because I knew that from experience, like when they are there, they're like genuinely upset with me if I don't do well.
Right.
And like also publicly. So like a tantrum, but like the parent throwing a tantrum instead.
Mm-hmm.
Um and honestly at that point, like when I was younger, it was less of an issue. When I got older, it was, like more embarrassing because then you like actually feel like, you have more developed emotions when you're older, obviously. Um, so when I was older, I was like, I'm glad they're not here because I don't want to hear any of that right now. Like I'm not in the mood for that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, honestly, I think it might have been the best option for all
Right.
parties if I was just alone. Because I'd rather have to deal with everything myself and like have the responsibility be on myself if I like forget anything or any of that, like anything happens,
Mm-hmm.
versus like having to have that extra little person on my shoulder being like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why did you score this? Why are you so bad? Like I don't need
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
So I guess it was like I was looking at other people and being like, that would be nice. And also like, what is wrong with you? Why are you throwing a tantrum? But also at the same time, it was like, that's not even possible for me in the first place. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
like this is the best thing.
Yeah. I understand that. Do you, you partially answered that question describing how your parents are,
Mm-hmm.
like, saying that they would be upset with you genuinely if you didn't do well.
Mm-hmm.
If they were the types of parents that were kinda like the super supportive ones that you saw, would you like, if that was the mental image that you had in your head for the hypothetical, would you feel differently?
Well, I think that that's a loaded question because if they were supportive in that aspect, then they would be supportive in other aspects of life as well. And
Mhm.
therefore, I would be a completely different person total.
Oh, no, 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 that's not what I meant in the question. I don't mean that if you had already seen them as that. I mean, because you answered my question in the realistic way in that you probably it was probably for the better that they weren't there because of the way that they act
Mm-hmm.
slash acted. But I mean, if they were like, did you ever? Because you said that you didn't see look at those parents and wish like, oh, I wish my parents were here because
Mm-hmm.
if they were, it wouldn't be fun. Like it would
Mm-hmm.
make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm saying, like, if you were to think about it and like, oh, I wish they were here and like that. You know what I mean? Like, did you ever think that ever?
Um,
And it's totally okay if you didn't or haven't. I was just wondering.
um, I guess when I was younger, again, um, yeah, I don't think, yeah, I think it was too over. I don't know if I'm answering the question properly, but I'll give you the answer and you can tell me if it's wrong. Or not what
Well,
you're
there's
looking
no
for.
wrong answer. It's your experience.
Um, I don't think I ever wished for that because the overshadowing like reality
Mm-hmm.
was like it was too big of an issue for me to be like, oh, I just wish they were here in general.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I don't think I ever really thought that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, thank you for answering my question.
I guess that also shows a lot of hyper independence.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But that was your experience.
yes.
And there's no wrong answer. I just wanted your answer.
Thank you.
Mhm. Well, you're welcome, I think.
What about you?
That's a great question. My experience with hyper independence has been fun.
I'm
No, it hasn't.
sure.
Uh, okay, let's like I was saying earlier, I am an only child, and so is Rihanna. And my hyper independence developed in, I don't know if I can really pinpoint it to a specific one in the way that Rihanna was talking about role reversal,
Mm,
because for me personally, and I'm not saying that it wasn't like this for Rihanna, it genuinely felt like such a combination of things that I don't really know if I can pull the strongest one out and
mm,
write my essay on that. So, only child. I was one of those kids where I also had to be independent very early on, but in a different way. Because, for instance, on my first day of kindergarten, I wasn't one of those kids that cried and didn't want to leave their parents. I mean, I don't actually remember this because I was too young. I've forgotten, but at least from what I've been told, I just walked in there and was fine.
mm,
And I think it was one of those things where, as an isolated incident, you can see that as a positive thing, but then when you put it together with other things,
mm,
it's not a very good thing.
mm,
Because, so my experience as an only child, because I also had extremely, and I still do, have extremely strict parents, I always had to be alone,
Mm,
and I was comfortable being alone in the sense that I somehow, I don't know, entertained myself enough or just also convinced myself that this was comfortable.
mhm,
And not in a way that I refused to hang out with people. I mean more that I was alone and I didn't really experience the separation anxiety that was mentioned earlier.
mhm.
And the thing is, like my parents wouldn't really let me hang out with people when I was little or when I was older. Uh, for instance, play dates or birthday parties or anything
Mm,
like that, right? I wasn't allowed to do any of those, with the exception of a family friend's kid, but that's because my parents were comfortable with that, and it wasn't really a hassle for them to have to get the kid per se, because the kid would have already been there naturally because the parents were together. And then also, I was one of those kids that grew up around adults because, like I was saying, no play dates, no hangouts. So weekend, it would be, for example, we're at dim sum, and then it's me, my parents, and then their friends, and I'm just kind of there. And so I grew up around adults, and I honestly, you can say this is biased. I'm okay with you saying it's biased because it probably is partially biased. I honestly think that kids or people that grew up too much around adults that tell you they like that are lying and haven't healed.
mhm. I agree.
Because I don't know if people out here are familiar with when Jaden said the thing about how he was glad that he grew up around adults because then you could talk about real world issues,
Yeah, funny.
which became a meme and a huge joke on
Mhm,
the internet.
mhm,
Kind of hurt to see a little, because the thing is, honestly, I, I was very alone growing up all the time.
mhm,
And for instance, if we were at a family friend's house, the my parents and their friends would be doing something, and I would be in the living room, and they would have the TV on. I'd be watching TV, kind of like today's iPad kid.
mhm.
I probably was an iPad kid in a different way.
TV
And
kid.
yeah, I did talk to adults about, I guess, real world things, and in the moment, or even just like a little later on, it felt like I was so mature for my age. I'm talking
Mhm.
to adults or blah blah blah. And it's annoying because it's a thing that you get complimented for. And I have been complimented for this. And maybe 5 years ago, I would have been one of those people that I was just talking about that weren't healed and were like, oh yeah, I, I was mature from a young age, blah blah.
Mhm.
I was comfortable around adults, talked about this, or I learned or knew about quote unquote more things. But really, it's just an illusion
Yeah.
that you kind of make up in your head for yourself, not necessarily intentionally. And my hyper independence was something that I didn't even really realize was hyper independence. And I thought
Mhm.
it was just independence, a very strong sense of independence, and I guess a
Yeah.
strong sense of self that I still battle with today. Because the thing is, I am, I don't know, I can ask teachers questions, but if I'm dealing with something, I could maybe talk to a friend, like I've talked to Rihanna. But in general, I'll just kind of isolate myself in a way.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, it's always the old saying, the whole it was something along the lines of in life, like at the end of the day, like you only have yourself, which is
Yeah.
true, but then you know,
Yeah.
it's true, but
But like maybe we shouldn't be pushing that. Like that's not
yeah,
healthy per se.
yeah. Or if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself.
Mhm.
Cause oh, and then that my parents were never really supportive in like any way
Mm.
ever, like emotionally or like educationally or anything. And that was something that I kind of like Rihanna, I didn't resent them for it in the sense that I wish they weren't like that because I knew that they couldn't be like that. And if they were like that in an attempt, it would be awful.
Yeah.
And I'd rather just be by myself or do something by myself. And even today, I would rather go hungry than to, I don't know, take $5 from them to go buy a sandwich.
Mm.
Because I believed, and I still do kind of believe that they'll use it against me because they have and they do.
Mm.
And so it's one of those things where you won't you won't ask for help because you think that they'll use it against you, or you're very selective about your favors. And
Mhm.
I am still a little bit like that with people in my life where I will only maybe ask favors from people that I trust, even if it's not even that huge of a deal. I'm able to separate certain things, like what I was saying about asking a teacher a question or looking at work, because in my mind, I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And it's a process. And what I was saying about doing it for myself, it kind of turned into this thing where I was able to take initiative, but then an initiative isn't bad, but
No.
it's just one of those things where you would always have to take initiative,
Mhm.
or the initiative. I don't need like it's to start not even knowing what the word initiative really is, or you're just constantly fending for yourself, or you start to mentally live as if you do live on your own, or as if it's, I don't know, for instance, 5 or however many years later, and I don't know, you're living in your own apartment and you just function like that
Mhm.
too early on when you're not living on your own or you're not doing this on your own. And one of the reasons for that, aside from what I was saying before, is because when I would ask my parents to buy things that I needed, like a notebook or something, and it wouldn't even necessarily be wanted them to buy it for me. I just needed to go,
Mhm.
and they would have to take me because I wasn't allowed to leave the house like ever. And they would never just say yes, or even just ask, "Oh, where?" or something like that. They would just say, "Is this absolutely necessary, or is this something that you're you're in a rush to do, or it's
Mhm.
urgent?" Because if it's not, then they'll never do it.
Mhm.
And so I would just rather somehow figure it out myself. And I would always, and I did, I just like, I mentally functioned as if I lived on my own. Or I would always be thinking about, for instance, when I get my own car, when I got my own apartment, or when I don't know, went off to university and I would be leaving the house more, because then in the time that I was out of the house, I could do more things that I needed to do
Mhm.
during that time because I was already out. And then I'd come home. None of this is healthy. I know. Let's just,
At least you're aware of it.
yes. And it's something that I've been working on, and it's hard. It's just because I still do live with my parents, and so I do. kind of cope with the whole functioning as if you live by yourself kind of thing.
Mm.
And it's one of those things that not just only children or Asian daughters or anyone, there's a thing that some kids do when they don't have the healthiest relationship with their parents, or they don't really have supportive, emotionally supportive parents, or supportive parents in general, where when their parents aren't home, they'll I don't know, not use headphones, or maybe they'll just chill in the kitchen because no one's there, or they'll watch TV in the living room instead of on their phone in a corner somewhere, or video chat someone without headphones, right? And so that was and then when they get home, you would, I mean, I personally wasn't, and I'm not the type of person where I close the door to my room all day and I don't interact with my parents at all. I can't really do that as an only child. Also because of the dynamic that I have with my parents, like way too long for me to explain in this segment. And I've already been going for a while. The gist of what I am doing now, or how I'm living now, it's just I interact with my parents, and I do still kind of have the mental thing of functioning as if you're living on your own, but you're not actually living on your own. And every day I do my best to basically keep things peaceful and keep moving forward till till I do till I no longer have to mentally function that way, and then I actually am functioning that way because then I'm living by myself, which, like I was saying earlier, isn't healthy. There's no but.
You could be coping in worse ways, though. I will say that.
Yeah. It's just hard because, you know, when you're talking about things like this, even not from a personal standpoint, not everything has a solution or a happy ending, or even just like not everything has some things are said and then you can't necessarily respond to it in a explanatory, is that how you say that word? In a way where you can explain or take things apart. Sometimes things are the way they are because of very complicated situations, and that thing or that situation isn't okay. But it's like easier said than done to take it apart. Right? Like I recognize that the functioning as if you're living on your own, or basically anything that I've said in the past, however long it's been since I've started, is not good, and I'm still working on it.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm glad that you are working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, by the sounds of the last segment with our personal experiences, and I'm sure, like we were saying, that some people can relate to it, and also some people have different variations of what we have dealt with, and then just like completely other experiences with hyper independence. Take this as a reminder to not necessarily like actually go and do it, but get us first gen Asian daughters need a hug. Could use a hug. And here at Fresh Off the Broke, we're mentally and virtually sending all of you a hug. If you want and need one, of course.
Yeah. let us know if you are going through something like this or if you've just seen this in general. Hopefully, we made you aware of this common phenomenon and just educated, I guess, some of you, because it is a very, very common thing.
And it's a very large shared experience among daughters, Asian daughters, first gen Asian daughters. The list goes on.
It does.
And of course, like always, thank you for tuning in today. We would especially like to thank you for listening to a podcast on a more serious side of things. Like this wasn't, there was a little talk about memes, but for the most part, it was pretty much on like the downside, or just like it was a little dark today. And we appreciate you for listening and sticking around.
I mean, a little dark, a little happy. That's life, I guess.
Yep. So like Rihanna was saying, we would love it if and appreciate it if you left a comment about your experience. Do you feel seen? Did you know that AAPI didn't just stand for Asian American Pacific Islander? What are your thoughts on the AAPI versus API discussion?
Have a little discourse, lighten things up.
And hey, maybe share with us some memes or some inside jokes that you have. We could use some.
We could. If you know, you know.
And we know.
Yeah.
And you know.
You know now that we know. But we don't know if you know. So let us know.
Exactly. So we all know.
Yeah. Well,
knowing space.
If you guys like this episode and want to stay connected with us, check out our website in the description. It contains links to our streaming platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and more. Follow us for more behind-the-scenes content, announcements, and other random things we decide to put on there.
See you next time.